What can we learn from the world of work in the 1950s to apply to our careers now that would actually help us? The reason I've been thinking about this is I was running a workshop recently on communication. And we were talking about the challenges we have at work now of how many different communication channels we have. People have Teams chats, Slack, Monday boards, email, phone, voice notes, WhatsApp messages. One participant said he had 10 different ways of communicating at work. That's really hard to manage and it's quite stressful. So it got me thinking about early on in my career how different that was. I thought today I'd actually go further back to the 1950s and share a bit about what the world of work was like then and what we can learn from that now. Now, just first to acknowledge, working in the 1950s wasn't a bed of roses. Most people were in very tough manufacturing jobs. A lot of groups, including women and minorities, were underrepresented, and there were a lot of unfair working practices. So I'm not saying the 1950s was some kind of work nirvana, but there were a lot of things that were better than now that we can learn from and try and adapt how we work now to be a bit healthier and actually be more successful in our jobs. So the first one is the communication. We are inundated with communication. So making sure you have a strategy around how you manage all the different communication channels that come into you. And make sure there is a clear channel for when things are really important. Because in the 1950s, people went to work, dealt with work while they were there, and then came home and had real leisure time and switched off. But now we're always on and we're always available. And it's easy to just check your phone while you're watching TV. So you need to have some clear boundaries with yourself about when you will and won't be available. You need to communicate that with your colleagues. So if you're not going to check emails late at night, make sure they know that and that they know in an emergency, how do they get hold of you? And it's the same with your family. How do you know when a WhatsApp's important or whether it's just the family channel, someone just putting a GIF on there? So it's really important that you make sure there's clear channels that when something's important, you're going to see it in a timely way. But you've also got a manageable way to deal with all that communication and make time for what we call deep thinking. So in the 1950s, you wouldn't be interrupted by a phone call every 3 minutes, but now people are interrupted by a Teams chat every 3 minutes. So you would have lots of uninterrupted thinking time. So that's where it's really important to look at your schedule and say, when am I going to stop and think about my job, think about my goals, think about the tasks I have, think about the challenges I have. That thinking time is really valuable because that's when we become creative, make good decisions and problem solve. If we don't have that thinking time, we're always being reactive. We're making very quick decisions that aren't well thought out. We don't think so long-term and strategically. So do think about, in the week, is there some way you can have some uninterrupted thinking time? How do you manage that? And also really think about, with your communication, when does your working day start and when does it end? Particularly if you work from home. Because in the 1950s, you left the office and you came home and that was leisure time. We don't really talk about leisure time anymore, but there was very clear time to relax and read a book or chat with your family or go out for a drink with a friend. And I think we would all benefit from being much clearer about when we're at work and when we're not at work. So that's the first thing, is kind of communication structure around the start and the end of the day. I do think there was just also generally more stability and structure for people. There was a job for life often for people. And so that helped you actually, if you knew you were in that job for the long term and it was more stable, that's less stressful, but also you could make more long-term career decisions instead of making decisions just based on short-term, how long am I going to be here? What do I need to do to keep my job? Should I be looking for the next thing? Which is very distracting. Nowadays, we move jobs much more frequently, and actually that can be really beneficial for our careers. But that's where you need to step back and think for yourself, what's my long-term career strategy? And also think about, how can I build long-term relationships? So yes, you might move around different firms, but how do you establish those really long-term mentorships, peer relationships, coaching relationships? Those people will help you in your career wherever you go. When I'm helping clients find new jobs, one of the things we're always talking about is their network. Who can they reach out to? So start investing in those long-term relationships now. And talking of investing in relationships, there was actually a lot more networking that happened in the 1950s. People really recognized the importance of building a relationship socially to then do business. So people would make more time to just get to know each other, and probably do that by going out for a meal or going out for a drink. Now we're so time pressured and we've got hybrid working, people aren't always together in the office, and I think it's really been deprioritized. So do stop and think about some of the people you work with. Would it be beneficial to spend a bit more time getting to know them and build that trust and that relationship? And if you think about your future career goals, what kinds of people will you need in your network? Will you need to help you? Would you like to help? Stop and think about that, and then think, how can I build those relationships? And really see that time as an investment. It's not a waste of time. It's a real investment in getting to know people and building long-term relationships that support your long-term career. But we do need to be more flexible and aware that we don't have jobs for life like they had in the 1950s. Something else that I think was different in the 1950s were very clear goals. In your job, you were generally told what to do by your manager. So you knew exactly what you had to achieve, and people weren't afraid to give feedback. So you knew if you were or weren't achieving your goals. Also, actually, most people were in manufacturing jobs, so they would have very tangible goals, and they could instantly see for themselves if they had achieved them or not. And at the end of the day, they would go home with that satisfaction of knowing they'd built 3 units of whatever they were building. So there was a lot of satisfaction and clear sense of achievement. Now, particularly in professional services, a lot of people are self-directed in their careers. They're given a general job description and they're given things to do, but their progress isn't monitored closely. Their goals or tasks aren't always super defined and measured. And so that's where people can struggle with a sense of achievement, but also to know if they're performing or not. And I'm finding a lot of managers these days are afraid to give feedback. They're worried about how people will take it. They're worried about if their team is resilient enough to deal with it. And so there is something about we're much less clear how we're performing. So bringing that forward today, what can you do about it? Set yourself very clear goals and tasks for the day. Be very disciplined with your to-do list. What are some of the measurable things I can do today? And then have the satisfaction of prioritizing and ticking them off, instead of letting your day just be a reaction to what's going on around you. So set yourself those clear goals, talk to your manager about what they want you to achieve, and actively seek feedback and respond really positively to it. The final thing I want to touch on is how much people used to work. I think we have this idea in the 1950s that everyone had a 9-to-5 job, and a lot of people did, and the average work week was 46 hours. And I have lots of clients who work much longer hours now, particularly in professional services. You've got people at a senior level working 60 to 80-hour weeks regularly. But actually, we do have a lot more flexible working. We do have a lot more people on very manageable working hours. So I think there is a little bit of a myth that we're working much harder than people used to. And just to put that in context, people used to have at most 2 weeks holiday a year. Everyone would have at least 1 week, but 2 weeks was good. And now most of my clients have 5 weeks holiday a year. So actually, even if we're working slightly longer hours, we have a lot more holiday downtime. But I think what that reflects is that we work quite intensively and we have quite a stressful week. And so we then need these really long holidays to completely switch off mentally and recover from the stress of our work. But actually, if we put a bit more structure around our working week, as they did in the 1950s, if we were a bit clearer about when our day started and ended, if we had a bit more discipline about how we communicated and giving ourselves that thinking time, and if we made sure our leisure time really was proper downtime, not thinking about work, not checking our messages, doing things that are truly relaxing with people that we loved, I think maybe we wouldn't need as much holiday as we desperately feel like we need now. We'd have much more sustainable energy and be more resilient. So think about your own career. What is it that you could do and what could you change in how you're working every day that might create a bit more structure and create a little bit more of a traditional work day and a more boundary relationship with how you communicate in the coming year that actually may help you be more relaxed, more productive, have more deep thinking time, and actually have a better relationship with your work. I hope that's given you some things to think about. I know that a lot of the things I've covered today are things that I need to think about and do myself.